Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And to my very special listeners, it's so wonderful that you're tuning in tonight, and so much love to all of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And all the better for sharing a lovely story with you tonight. So go and get yourself that effervescent sparkling drink, or go and get yourself something warm and comforting, because I've got a fabulous story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, the year was 1966. I remember the year so remarkably well. It was the illustrious Chinese year of the firehorse that occurs only once in a 60-year cycle. And there was a noteworthy celebrated newspaper article in the paper that read the following: "This is not just your stereotype customary year. This is the year of the firehorse. And much like the name suggests, there is nothing ambiguous or prevailing about this momentous, exceptional year that lies ahead of us with an inviting, mysterious intrigue. The free-spirited assertiveness of the firehorse will have momentous implications on all of us, as a distinguished year that will not go by unnoticed. Indeed, its imperishable, unfading memory will almost undoubtedly leave an indelible impact on our lives, and invoke us to make choices and decisions this year on impulse that will serve our best spiritual needs. For the firehorse dives into situations without reluctance and disengages all doubt and trepidation. So some of your moments of bodacious courage and your most innovative, electrifying ideas will be birthed in this year, which will bring about fruit for the generations to come." I remember reading the article to my mother, who pooh-poohed it. Why was I surprised about this? My mother was the world's greatest cynic, who doubted everything beyond what you could actually see physically. So something as fanciful and far-fetched as horoscopes, especially Chinese ones, was not something that floated her boat by any manner of means, or could be really trusted. "Oh, for goodness sake, Logan, please don't tell me you buy into all that redundant nonsense. I'm sure this year is going to be much like any other year. They only write all this stuff to keep us entertained. It's called being industrious and conservative with the truth." "I don't know, Mum," I say. "I rather like the idea of it being the year of the firehorse. It sounds exciting, progressive, dramatic, if you ask me. And by all accounts, the Chinese take this stuff awfully seriously. They've done so for thousands of years, you know." "So what are you saying, Logan?" says my mother, who's piling the dirty dishes into the aluminium's kitchen sink and soaking them in the soapy hot water, almost flinching as the hot water burns her hands. She gasps as she pulls her burnt hand from the water. "Ouch! Ouch! All this talk about fire! I've just scorched my hand. Oh, it's burning really badly. Maybe you're right. It is going to be a hot year. In more ways than one," she chuckles. "Boy, that was hot." I remember thinking to myself that the firehorse was going to be a year that almost certainly impacted my life, because regardless of what my mother's scathing rebuffed comments were, I had a profound, deep guttural sense that this poignant year I would never forget, and I was later to discover that my impressions were on the money, as 1966 was an evocative year that I would never, ever forget. It was the summer holidays, and I was looking for all kinds of odd jobs to undertake in order to make some much-needed money. I was an assiduous, rather industrious 18-year-old kid who liked to be kept busy all the time. Over the last 5 years, I had studiously built up a sizable savings account by devoting my free time to painstakingly mowing people's lawns, painting house interiors and exteriors, washing windows and cars. I even took up a part-time job at the grocer's, where I stocked shelves. I was asking around town if anyone knew what jobs were going in Montana that paid well. I was eager to save enough money to buy myself a red Ford Bronco, and when I had my mind set on something, I'd stop at nothing to attain my goal, even if it meant working my butt off in order to bring it into fruition. My father always used to say to me, If you want something badly enough, you would always get it if you worked hard enough for it, and really believed in the object of your attainment. I had heard from a friend of mine, a girl called Lisa Duckworth, that there was a woman who lived on the outskirts of a small rural town here in Montana, who was looking for someone to babysit her 14-year-old daughter, her 2 cats and a dog, while she went away. "I saw the sign on the window of the diner in the small town there," she told me. "I took down the details. I was thinking of taking the job myself, you see. But I can't now," she said, scrunching her face up in disappointment. "We're going to Florida for the holidays, so I can't do it. Or you can bet your bottom dollar I would not be telling you about it, that's for sure." "Why are you looking so downcast, Lisa?" I said. "You lucky bugger. I wish my parents were taking me on a beach holiday, somewhere lovely and sunny. But you look as if someone's told you that your funeral is on Monday." "I'm just disappointed, Logan, that's all," she says gingerly. "I'm just like you. I have my eyes on saving up for an Austin Morris, so I'm hardly going to be making money swimming in the ocean, luxuriating on the beach. I'll be spending all my savings frivolously on ice cream, sun hats and little souvenirs. I'm good at saving money, Logan, very good, but I'm even better at spending it. That's my quintessential problem. I acquired the dreadful habit from my mother. She's the spender in our household. My father is the saver. So I've inherited both of their traits. I'm perpetually at war with myself, as the saver within me wants to sabotage the spender, and vice versa." "You could try and be frugal. Cut back on all the spending while you're away." "Are you kidding, Logan? When I go on holiday, part of enjoying myself is spending money. That makes the holiday so much more fun. Still, when I get back, I'll have to work twice as hard to save up for the car of mine that I'm longing to buy. I'm going to get that Austin Morris. Do you hear me? I'm going to get it." "I hear you, and I believe you. I'm sure you will, I say." Suffice to say, the job Lisa saw in the window of the diner, in that small rural town, not far away from where I actually lived, was up my street. It promised to pay handsomely, and the thing that appealed to me the most was I would live in, so I would have the independence that I craved. The thought of spending the summer holidays with my mother's beady eye hovering over me all the time was not pleasing to me. I'd always enjoyed my own company, and the idea of taking this job sounded very agreeable, especially if it paid well. My friend gave me the contact details of Mrs. Stoneheart. I seriously hoped that her unyielding surname was not going to be as hard-hearted as the woman herself. In my gut, I felt almost certain that the job was actually mine. That was if I wanted it. It seemed I wasn't wrong, as no one appeared to be beating down her door to get that job. The house was nothing like I was expecting, but then again, I'm not sure what I was actually anticipating. It was a double-storey, very robust, full-flavoured building that was easy on the eye. Houses here in Montana need to be exceedingly well built to withstand the harsh, cruel elements of nature's seasonal weather, which can certainly cause issues with leaking roofs or rotting wood. The understated home was as sturdy and strong as you could get, but its secure, muscular structure did not diminish the house's aesthetic appeal or arresting features. I think whoever designed it had a creative eye. The mellow house was simple, but fastidious attention was devoted to the unassuming details of its construction that was so elusively subtle that it wasn't obvious, rather like a woman wearing a refined makeup who looks like she's wearing no makeup at all. It was perfectly symmetrical, not too big nor too small, nestled gracefully on stone foundations. It was built out of brick and mortar, painted white with a large sloping grey slate roof to ensure that snow and water could slip down the eaves easily. I liked the fact that the house had magnanimous white wooden sash windows, so that the outside would welcome its wholesome views into the house. The rear of the property was hugged generously by a wooden deck wrap-around porch that had been well maintained over the years. The white house nuzzled the viridescent valley, and was intimidated by the tall, undulating sweeps of the mountains that arrested the background. They stood up, lofty and proud, harnessing their splendiferous contours into the cobalt blue sky, with a pompous, regal audacity. The sprawling meadows were elegantly dominated by a plethora of bright pink Californian larkspurs, which gracefully covered the meadows in a disorganized tangled confetti of pink petals, while rocky outcrops burst through the knee-high grass like pleasing sculptural masterpieces that reminded you of the voluptuous shapes of Rubenesque women, often depicted in the great artworks of Peter-Paul Rubens in 1577. The meadow was richly embellished with a scattering of alpine trees that sanguinely fringed its border with an intrepid serenity and a sure-footed repose. These imposing trees penciled up and spread-eagled themselves into the sky in long vertical sweeps with boughs bedecked and adorned with needled tassels. I had parked my brother's truck on the white sandy driveway at the edge of the meadow, where a slim curvaceous path winded its way through the field of pink that led directly to an overhanging portico, which arched gracefully over the gleaming pale blue front door, with its shiny gold horseshoe knocker. I noticed either side of the door was serenaded by terracotta pots containing tall lollipop rose bushes, with rounded heads ablaze with trailing red roses. As I made my approach to the door, it was quickly swung open by a woman in her 40s, who looked rather delicate, her porcelain skin so white, her features refined. In truth, it was almost impossible to believe that this woman had ever stepped out into the Montana sun a day in her life, and if indeed she did, she must have always worn the hugest sun hat to have such a peachy, almost perfect skin. She had a delicate quality about her, rather like the alpine flowers in the valley, that could so easily snap if you severed them under one of your boots. I would say that although there was a distinctive vulnerability to this woman, there was also a stoic strength in her demeanour, which I could see very clearly in her determined blue eyes. This loganimous woman did not wear her heart on her sleeve, but clandestinely obviously buried her feelings, rather like a squirrel hiding away its stash of acorns. I got a sense that this gentlewoman was hiding an indelible hurt. I was to learn later on in life that my instinctive impressions of her were bang on the money. "Come this way," she said. She was wearing such a floaty dress that splashed gracefully above her slender ankles. She beckoned for me to sit down on a comfortable upholstered chair in her well-appointed living room that was sheltered gracefully beneath high ceilings, an elegant chandelier, and directly opposite a grand fireplace framed by a marble mantel. "I'm so glad you've come, Logan," she said, looking at me with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "In truth, I've had absolutely no response to the advert I left in the diner window. I really was beginning to think I'd have to postpone the trip. My sister's ill, I'm afraid. She lives in Philadelphia, so I need to stay with her for a while, just to help her through this challenging time that she's going through." "I'm sorry to hear that. That's bad news," I say. "It is, but the doctor says the prognosis is good. I'm sure you can appreciate that when someone in your family is sick, they need all the support they can get. So I need to spend a couple of weeks with her, and that's why I need someone like you to hold things together for me while I'm away. Do you think you could do that?" "Of course. I'm very glad to help," I say. "In your ad, you said you'd be paying handsomely." "Indeed I will. But before you jump in the deep end, Logan, and agree to this arrangement with me, I need to know if you can take on this job, whether you're up to the challenges it demands." "Well, it's not difficult," I say. "I assume you want me to look after 2 cats and a dog, and a 14-year-old girl. I mean, how complicated can that be?" The woman pauses for a moment. "That's absolutely right. I'm not actually worried about my cats or my dog," she tells me. "Indeed, you look like a responsible young man to me. But it's my 14-year-old daughter I'm worried about. She's a real handful, I'm afraid. It's just she's getting to that age when she's not afraid to use her tongue like a sandblaster, and her words can be exceedingly abrasive. I mean, my daughter has no filter. She has no ability to tame her tongue. She'll tell you exactly what she thinks and damn the consequences. It seems as soon as she turned 13, a switch was flicked on in her, and gone was the nice, sweet, unassuming girl, to be replaced by, how can I put it, a combustible ball of fire. I gather at school she's upset so many of the pupils. The headmistress has actually called me in twice to discuss my daughter's unruly, insubordinate behaviour with me. What I'm trying to say to you, Logan, is that provided that you've got the hide of a rhino, The job is almost certainly yours. My daughter could literally break you down and give you a hard time. She can be
out of control, I say, finishing her sentence for her. Yes, Logan.
Exactly that. Out of control. Like a wildfire that cannot be tamed.
I think I can cope with a disagreeable 14-year-old. I've grown up with 2 sisters. They've taught me a lot. Believe me, they can spit some nasty stuff out of their mouths from time to time. I'm used to girls like that.
Mrs. Stoneheart looks relieved. That's settled then. The job is yours. I need to introduce you to Bagel. He's half Great Dane and Bull Mastiff, she says, opening the kitchen door, so a larger-than-life dog comes bounding out of the kitchen and eagerly greets me with a wagging tail and sniffs me curiously.
Hello, boy, I say to the dog, giving him a big cuddle.
Mrs. Stoneheart watches me cuddle her big dog. He's a sensitive dog, very well behaved. He was joined at the hip to my husband, you know, she says, flushing.
Where is your husband? I ask her.
Oh, he went missing one day a couple of years ago. Never been seen since, I'm afraid. We had a bit of a stormy altercation, you see. You know how it is. He left me a note, told me he was never coming back, and that was that.
Oh, I'm very sorry, Mrs. Stoneheart. I didn't mean to pry. I had absolutely no idea.
Don't be, she says, wiping away a tear that trickles down her face. It is what it is, you know. Things happen in life, don't they? Things that can't ever be changed or undone. It's like every day we live our lives, we're writing a chapter of a book. And one day, when we finally leave this planet, our book is completed, our own exclusive edition.
Wow, that's rather a good analogy. I never thought about our lives like that. We're all writing our own exclusive copies.
Something like that. Now let's see, she says, pointing to the deep freezer. I've got loads of frozen meals in here, neatly labelled. You just need to take them out of the freezer the day before. Then you pop them in the oven at 180 degrees Fahrenheit to warm up, and Bob's your uncle. I've written down what food to give the cats and dogs. I'll make an arrangement with the grocers to drop bread, milk and some baked goods to the house every other day. Now let's see. Let me show you your bedroom. It's upstairs, and of course I need to introduce you to the cats. This is Cinnamon, and this is his sister Spice. His sister Spice is very gentle, but Cinnamon is a little bit more feisty, she said to me when we'd entered the upstairs bedroom, with a queen-sized bed covered in a spectacular emerald green duvet cover that emulated the prepossessing verdant views of the countryside. There was a generous sunlight streaming through the room, casting its pretty light shadows over the oak wood furnishings. I glanced out of the window and could see the big goofy dog I'd met moments before, lying underneath a large oak tree, scratching the ground up with his claws.
What's he doing? I ask.
Oh, Bagel's a bit of a digger, says Mrs. Stoneheart. He's fixated about that particular spot under the oak tree. He likes to park himself there all day. If you can't find him, that's where he'll be.
Strange behaviour for a dog.
Both the Stoneheart cats were comfortably curled up together in a cosy heap, like a large puddle of brown fur, on the luxurious bed, basking on the resplendent emerald green cover, like seals sunning themselves on the ocean's sand. The cats stirred for a moment when I began to stroke their sleek, smooth coats, their green eyes studying me judiciously, as if to say, "Who the hell is this?" Both of the cats were chocolate in colour, with the distinctive characteristics of Siamese cats. I run my hands again down their silken fur, and they begin to immediately purr. They're beautiful, aren't they? We found them on our doorstep in a cardboard box 7 years ago, would you believe it? We rescued them. We never looked back. They've become great characters in our household, I have to say. Do you like this room, Logan? She asks me.
It's beautiful. I love the views out there.
Good. It is the room with the best views in the house, I have to say. I thought it could be yours. The cats will definitely be sleeping in here with you. They love this room.
I can see why. With the curtains drawn, it's pleasingly sunny. If I was a cat, I would gravitate here myself. They clearly have great taste.
Come with me, says Mrs. Stoneheart, and brace yourself for impact, she warns. I need to introduce you to Simone. She leads me further down the passage to a room where I could hear loud music blasting away, and the words "I can't get no satisfaction" from the Rolling Stones being played on the radio. Mrs. Stoneheart knocks politely on the door. I can see she looks a little apprehensive.
Sweetheart! Sweetheart, may I come in, please? What do you want, Mum? Comes a booming voice. Can't you see I'm busy? Why don't you just leave me alone?
I've got someone I need you to meet, sweetheart, says Mrs. Stoneheart. May I please come in?
Why bother asking, Mum? You'll come in anyway, won't you?
You always do, comes a capricious, belligerent voice. Mrs. Stoneheart opens the door reluctantly, and a young 14-year-old girl is seen lying across her bed, with her legs and feet curled up from the knees, while her head is perched over bent elbows as she's paging through a large book. I notice the walls of her room are covered in posters, some of Gary Grant, the Hollywood heartthrob in movies like The Magnificent Obsession and Pillow Talk, and then there were posters of Bobby Sherman and Robert Wagner. The pugnacious 14-year-old girl has pale skin much like her mother, but that is where the similarity begins and ends. Her bob dark hair is as dark as a raven's feathers, and her brown eyes are the colour of chocolate, heavily lined with a black kohl. She has almost got a goth but very unorthodox look about her, and is dressed in black jeans and a dark sweater. She could be pretty if she smiled, but the girl gives me and her mother a big scowl, as her lips curl downwards into a huge smirk. This is Logan, sweetheart. He's going to be looking after you while I'm away.
Mum, I'm not a baby. I don't need anybody looking after me. Do I look like I need anybody looking after me? I'm perfectly able to look after myself, she says obsequiously.
You do need someone looking after you, sweetheart. You really do. You're not as mature as you think you are. You can be a loose cannon at the very best of times.
How old are you, Logan? Asked Simon defiantly.
I'm 18 years old.
Mum, he's only 4 years older than me, and you expect me to take orders from him? Are you kidding me? I'm not going to be bullied by an 18-year-old. Never.
You'll do as I say, Simon. Logan is grown up. You're still very young, and you'll listen to him. Do you understand? I want you to be very nice to him while he's staying in this house. Do you get my drift?
I'm sorry, Mum, but I don't want a stranger in this house with me. I told you I'm perfectly capable of looking after myself. Do I look like I'm a baby? This is Montana, for goodness sake. There are no criminals running amok over here. It's safe here, Mum. You overreact. You always overreact.
I know, Simon. It's safe here in Montana. I agree with you. But I'm sure your mother wants peace of mind for you. I don't want to interfere with your fun. I assure you of that. But I will be here for you manning the fort. That's what your mother wants for you. She wants to feel that you'll be taken care of while she's away. The good news is I'll heat up our meals for us, feed the dogs and the cat, so you won't have to worry about those daily practicalities. And surely that's a good thing for you.
Whatever. As long as you leave me alone. Do you understand that? Then we'll get on okay. Now please go, the both of you. Leave me alone.
I told you she's a handful, says Mrs. Stoneheart. If her father were here, he'd tow her into line, I assure you. But sadly, that's not to be. Every daughter needs a father figure in their life. I think I've allowed her to get away with her outrageous behaviour, probably out of my guilt that her father's not here. I give in to her more than I should. So are you still keen on the job after having met the volatile storm cloud, my daughter?
Absolutely, Mrs. Stoneheart. I think I can handle her. I've seen far worse.
You have no idea how grateful I am to hear that, Logan. I'll leave you my contact details so you can call me should the need arise.
I'm sure that won't be necessary, Mrs. Stoneheart.
And so it was I moved into the Stoneheart household for 2 weeks of my summer holidays. Let's just say there was no love lost between me and Simone. She was an obstreperous, quarrelsome teenager who was mutinously at war with the world and possibly herself. Definitely with herself, with refractory hormones shooting up all over the place like a powerful waterfall. She'd barely acknowledge me, and whenever she did, she gave me a contemptuous scowl and a belligerent glare. She would seditiously thunder off to her bedroom, with the meals on a tray, which she would dump into the kitchen for me to clean up after she'd finished. She barely gave me the time of day, but I didn't care. I knew that Simone had her own issues, and whatever they were nothing to do with me. I was also certain that some of her combative indignance had risen from her father abandoning her home
2 years prior. That was not easy for any daughter to comfortably digest or to willingly accept, least of all a petulant, rather hawkish teenager who could fly off the handle if you merely mentioned her name. I was thoroughly enjoying the solitude of the countryside, and if Simone wanted to lock herself away in her bedroom, listening to Elvis Presley, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, the Beatles, or the Rolling Stones, then she could do just that. She was welcome. I would not take offence to her idiosyncratic behaviour. I thoroughly enjoyed taking my sketchbook out into the countryside, drawing charcoal pictures of the flowers, plants, animals and birds I encountered. It had been absolute ages since I'd found the time to pursue my pastime, as I was always working so hard. But now indulging my passions and being paid for it in the process was like having my Christmases all at once. I noticed Simone would regularly entertain her giggling girlfriends. 2 of them. They'd both come to her bedroom and hang out with her all day, and often stay for the night. They would thunder behind her up the sweeping staircase and be swept into her bedroom, where they would slam the door behind them. I'd often hear the music blasting away, sometimes throughout the night. I'd hear mumbling voices, excited chatter, and always a plethora of giggles. Simone's account, the 29th of May 1966. When Logan moved into our farmhouse while my mother was away for the summer break, I was exceedingly annoyed. I was an obnoxious teenager. I admit that. I was furious with the world and pretty much hated almost everyone, with the exception of my 2 friends, who were on exactly the same page as me, suffering from the same teenage hang-ups and tribulations as I was. I think we were troubled souls, raised by single parents who had an axe to grind, as we didn't have father figures in our lives to help soften the hardness in our unyielding hearts that seemed to have grown a layer of moss over them, to block out the hurt and shelter us from the storms of life. I think reacting with anger was like a defensive mechanism for us, much like the black ink spurted out by an octopus in self-defense. Our black ink was our capricious energy, which certainly succeeded in keeping people at bay, who would walk on eggshells to accommodate our inflamed moods. I know my mother always would. We were all hurting, even though we didn't know how to articulate or express those feelings, but somehow on an unconscious level, we knew we were connected together by the same sorry woes. I emphatically believed that if our fathers had been present in our lives, we would have been much more well-adjusted teenagers and would have possibly been all-round more amenable people. Instead, we felt a sense of abandonment, as all our fathers were estranged from our lives. All I knew was that my beloved father suffered from a crippling physical pain after a nasty riding accident that occurred in the fall of 1962. But suddenly he vanished from my life on the 30th of October 1964. My mother showed me the note my father left us, telling us he was going for good and didn't want to be found as he couldn't take the fighting any longer. I thought it was exceedingly bizarre, as I don't recall a single time my parents ever had a fight, and I can honestly say they loved the bones off each other. So something about this paradoxical mystery was off. I knew my mother knew more than she was actually saying. She was exceedingly evasive and just said that she and my father had parted ways after this fight. My mother registered him as a missing person. I don't think the police were very concerned. They believed my father had just buggered off into the sunset and wasn't coming back any time soon, and that was that. No questions were asked. "Who is that rather handsome boy I saw in the kitchen washing up your dishes?" my friend asks me. "I thought you said we'd have this place to ourselves when your mother went away. At least he's working like a dog. Honestly, what are you like, letting him clean up after you like this? I kind of feel quite sorry for him. I'd hate to be your slave." "It's a bummer, I know. It is what it is," I say. "But at least he cleans up the dirty dishes and reheats the meals for me." I just couldn't persuade my mother to leave me in the house unsupervised. I mean, it's ridiculous. He's only about 4 years older than us. But Mum insists I can't be here alone. It's absolutely pathetic. "He's quite good looking," says my other friend Jennifer, who had an eye for the boys. "I like my men older. He looks a lot like Johnny Cade, I think. Same dark hair and sultry eyes. He's rather hot." "We're 14. He's 18, I remind her. "I bet you he thinks we're just babies.
My mother says there's a big difference between the maturity of a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old. Believe you me, he acts like he thinks I'm a silly little kid. Anyway, the great news is I think he'll leave us alone. In truth, I think he's a wee bit intimidated by me. I give him that look, and he shrinks away. Well, it's cool at least that he lets us sleep over. Your mother would never have agreed to that. So I suppose we should be grateful for small mercies, however small they may be. So is everyone up for it then? Asks my friend Jennifer, looking at us both. Katie shrugs her shoulders awkwardly. I'm still a bit scared. You know, I've heard stories. I pull out the large black box from under my bed and open it. We pull out the Ouija board and just stare at it. Oh, come on, says Jennifer. I wish you weren't such a prude, Katie. I mean, what harm can it actually do?
The pastor of our church says we shouldn't play with Ouija boards. It can open up portals, invite demons, Katie insists. Oh, come on. Don't be so melodramatic, Katie, says Jennifer. I mean, look at this thing. It's just like a Monopoly board, isn't it? With letters on it, that's all. And a heart-shaped planchette. It's not like we're using a book of black magic, are we, to conjure up demons? That's called invoking, you know. And we're not doing that, are we? We're just going to see if we can speak to the dead. Go on, it'll be great fun. In truth, it's probably a hype all about nothing. But why should we worry? Ouija boards have outsold Monopoly boards of late. Everybody is doing it. So if there really is something to worry about, people everywhere would be complaining about the boards. You'd be hearing about it on the radio. My bet is it's a harmless game. Oh, all right, says Katie. I'll give it a go. But promise me one thing. We will stop the game if it gets scary, or if anything funny or untoward happens. So there we are. We're at the end of part 1. Tomorrow night it's part 2 and it's very exciting, so don't miss it for the world. Until next time, goodbye and good night.